dos tòtems de la novel·la negra i el thriller. Molts us estareu
Novel and
preguntant...
thriller, and many of you may be wondering why Xavier is not here. He was the moderator who was supposed to be here. He is trapped in the railroad system. You know how it is now in Spain. He's in some point between Madrid and Barcelona. Maybe he is in Calatayud, who knows? But at any rate, he will not make it. So I'll be here. My name's Lara. I read them a lot. I've read a lot of their books, so I hope I'll do very well. I'll do my best. And let's introduce them. We have here S.A. Cosby and Jordan Harper. I was going to introduce them. Well, first, big round of applause for them. Both of them have new books published with Salamandra in Spain. For Cosby, King of Ashes, and for Jordan Harper, Silencios que Matan, everybody knows. I was going to tell you a bit about these books, but they told me they are good friends. They've met in several festivals, and if I'm not mistaken, both of them are some of the first readers of each other's books. Is that so? Do you read each other's books? Let's start there. I don't know, Cosby, maybe we can start with you. Could you tell me about Everybody Knows? How could you explain the story to us?
So Everybody Knows is a beautiful, gorgeous, brutal story of the underbelly of Los Angeles, where movie stars walk side by side with drug dealers, and drug dealers work side by side with publicists who try to keep the bad news coming in and keep the good news from getting out. It is like the love child of Chinatown and The Player, but through the iconic prose of an author like Jordan Harper, it becomes a instant classic.
That's perfect. I will not make any spoilers. And before your novel is introduced, what did you think the first time you read it? Did you suggest any changes? Did you have any notes for him? What were your feelings when you read it for the first time?
I thought it, was fully formed. It came out as close to perfect as a crime novel can be. I mean, there was a couple notes I had here and there. I had more notes for his new book than I have for this one.
All right. This is because you know that your book is going to be presented now. What can you tell us about Everybody Knows?
About King of Ashes? King of Ashes is sort of a Southern Gothic 21st century Godfather. And it tells the story of a man who's coming to grips not just with the evil of the world around him, but the evil inside himself. And what it means to accept power, what it means to take responsibility for what you do. And it's also, a touching story about family, and it's a tragic story, and it also has some of the most horrifying scenes that I've ever read in fiction, and I mean that in the best way possible.
Okay, wonderful. We don't know. I mean, we'll get going. Let's talk about your characters. Let's start with Cosby. The main character is Roman Carruthers, a financier from Atlanta, and high-standing, and he has to drop everything because his family calls him. It was 5 years ago. They haven't talked for 5 years, sorry, and his father was in a car crash, and he wants to go because he's afraid that his father will die and he will not be able to say goodbye, and he also wants to find out what happened. What can you tell us about Roman?
That's pretty much it. Roman is one of my least favorite characters, but one of my most fascinating. I'm fascinated with him. I'm fascinated with the price of power. I'm fascinated with how we touch the darkness within ourselves. Roman tells himself that the things he's doing are to protect his family, to protect his father's legacy. But I think, honestly, if he could be honest with himself, he would tell you that he does it because he's really good at it. And I think that's the crux of the book is what do you do when you find out the thing you're really good at is a terrible thing? It's awful. And I find Roman, like, I'm fascinated by him, but I wouldn't want to have a drink with him.
I don't know if you, Jordan, with May, I mean, your main character, maybe you would like to go for a drink with her or not. I don't know. Maybe you can tell us yourself. So she defines herself as a fixer. What does that mean? What can you tell us about her?
Well, as Sean so correctly said, she is a PR person whose job is to not get the good news out, but to keep the bad news in. And as to whether or not I would like to have a drink with her, I did have drink with these kind of black bag publicists while I was doing research for this book. And I will say, I like May. The real life people I did not like. The casualness with which they would discuss evil and their kind of matter-of-factness of, well, this is my job. I have to protect these people. Everybody has a right for a defense, don't they? And they talking about the worst people, you've all heard their names, and so I didn't enjoy the real thing, but I like to write about people who are conflicted, who have a good side to them, but have to suppress it in order to exist in this unjust world. And in that regard, May Pruitt is absolutely an avatar for myself, working in Hollywood, which I've done on and off, mostly on for the last 15 years. So I had a lot of bad energy and a lot of secrets that I wanted to get out, and everybody knows was my way to do that.
Now that you talked about Hollywood, have you had problems in documenting yourself, or after publishing the novel, were there people who weren't too happy about the things you said or tried to investigate about? Because you say things here and, well, many readers may be thinking, is it true? Do these things happen?
First of all, yes, it's true. It almost all happens. And I don't know about the people who commit those crimes. I can tell you that the people I know in Hollywood are overjoyed to read about it in a fictional setting, because one of the things that May Pruitt says over and over again in the book is that in Hollywood, nobody talks, but everybody whispers. And that's very true. In fact, today I got a text from a mutual friend of ours who is reading my next novel, which is also set in this world. And he sent me a screen grab of a very mean description of a person where I don't use their real name. It's fictionalized, but he knew exactly who I was talking about. And he was so overjoyed that somebody was talking about this guy in print, even with the name fictionalized, And so I think there's a lot of resentment in the world about how the powerful can do as they please. And even amongst people in Hollywood who have to rub shoulders with them, maybe that's where the most resentment is. So I think most people really enjoy reading about it.
And of course, in your case, Cosby, it is more complex than Hollywood. I will say why in a minute, because you live near many of the locations you describe. You're from the south of the United States, and in your novels are based there, this last one as well. And on your daily life, you meet your neighbors, and maybe they're not happy about you describing a city as dirty or criminal. So how have they experienced it, or do they tell you things when they see you, or are you afraid when you're writing that it might upset them?
I can fight, so I'm not. You can write what you want if you can fight. Can't nobody whoop your ass. No, in all honesty, my hometown, the people that I grew up around, are the inspiration for the characters that I use, and I was concerned about that in the beginning, and so I didn't use my hometown, the real name. I made a fictional name, fictional place, so on and so forth. But I've been surprised that the people in my hometown love the books. They're so happy for me. Like I like to say, even people who grew up not liking me are happy for me. And so when I'm out in town, like I'm at the grocery store or getting gas at the gas station, I'll have people that I know will come up to me and they was like, "Hey, put me in your next book." And I'm like, "Have you read my books? Because that's not going to end well." And they're like, "Yeah, I love it." And so I did in King of Ashes. I have a friend whose name is Getty. and something happens to Getty in the book. I won't say what it was. And he read the early draft of the book, and he was so overjoyed. He was like, "Oh, this is great! I'm so thankful for you." Like, really? Oh, okay. I mean, that's fine, I guess. But no, my family and friends and the neighbors and stuff have just really embraced me and really celebrated my work and my success and all that. So I don't worry about that anymore. There's a writer from Texas named Joe Lansdale who says you have to write like everybody you know who would be offended by it is dead. And if you take that mentality, then I think you're on a good path.
Yeah, I'm sure many of these people from Hollywood who like your descriptions, or your neighbors who want to be in your books even though they will turn up dead in the novel. Well, if there's ever a film based on these books, they may want to be there as extras, maybe. I'm asking about films because you both have a very audiovisual language. I don't know, maybe if you want to tell us a bit about that, if there's production company that is interested in buying the rights, or have you considered that for the future?
I guess I'll go.
Yeah?
For example?
You want me to go?
Yeah, you do.
Okay. But my very first novel, She Rides Shotgun, which is for sale here, is The Education of Polly McCluskey, was just turned into a movie. I think it's available on Amazon Prime here in Spain, I hope. It's available most places. So I've been through that world. And then literally this week, we're taking Everybody Knows out as a movie with a very cool star attached, whose name, unfortunately, I can't say right now. I think maybe that's Sean's problem, too, is that we're always sworn to secrecy in these things. And if you come and ask me when there's not a microphone, I will tell you, but I can't talk about it here. So, but yeah, no, I think I don't write anything to make it a movie. I don't write anything to make it a TV show. I just think that both of us come from the pulp tradition that is very visceral and very alive, and also, really trying to put the audience inside the world. And I think that's something that appeals to filmmakers as well, because I think, that oomph. Want to hear the translator translate oomph?
Yeah.
I think that's a very big part of both crime fiction and a lot of cinema today. So,
So all 5 of my books have been optioned for TV or movies. All the Sinners Bleed is filming right now in Atlanta, and it was the most surreal experience. I got to visit the set, and to go down there, and All the Sinners Bleed is about police officer Titus Crown, and he is the head officer of a small town called Charon. And to go to the set and see the police car with the Charon Town seal on it, to see him in the uniform with the sheriff badge that says Titus Crown, to hear him say the words that I've written, because they used them in the script, it moved me to tears. It's an amazing experience to see your book come to life. A lot of times people ask me, are you worried that the movies are going to ruin your book? They can't. The book will always be the book, and the movie is always its own separate entity. Walter Mosley, who's an amazing American writer, gave me a great piece of advice. He said, people want to make a movie out of your book is like somebody coming to your house and cooking in your kitchen. As long as nobody dies from food poisoning, everything's okay. So I'll just take the money and cash the checks. And, I want to be in the movie theater when the movie's made and see it and see how it turns out. But, the books are separate entities. But to Jordan's point about writing, I do think we both write in that, very visual, cinematic pulp style of I like to call it the 5 senses. So you use we talk about how things smell, how things feel, the splatter of blood on your face if you shoot someone, the pain of getting your teeth knocked out. There's a very sort of passionate way of writing about those things. But at the same time, you can also write in a very beautiful style. That's what I think crime fiction is. It's writing about terrible things in a beautiful way. Like his prose, I was saying this the other night, we had dinner with some friends, and he's the type of writer where I could hide his name on the cover of the book and you would still know it's him, because his style is so unique and so different in the best way from most of the writers that are out there. And he has said that about me, but I think, I think the thing that makes us different from some writers is that we both, and we've talked about this a lot, like we said, we are friends, we've talked this about, we both have higher goals than just writing a crime novel. And that's not to say that a crime novel needs those higher goals. You don't need it. You know, you can drive a car with a regular muffler and it's fine. But if you get a car with a powerful muffler with duals, it just moves a little better. It makes you feel a little better. So I think we both are looking at it. He said to me one day, he says, you know, I don't want to write books that in 15 years I'm ashamed I wrote. And I definitely think that's what kind of elevates writers like me, Jordan, William Boyle, folks like that, to another level, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
How was the process of documentation? Because one thing is a romantic novel. I don't know, everyone has experienced a better or worse love story, but here we're talking about criminals. We talk about corruption. I don't know if you have friends amongst the evil guys. I don't know if you want to name names. You probably won't. But do you have an informer, someone who gives you tips or clues, or do you go to seedy neighborhoods, so to speak? How do you do it? How do you document yourselves? I don't know if you follow the same method, your friends, maybe you go together.
If I can speak for both of us, I can tell you that we were both, I think, maybe the nerdiest thugs in our neighborhood. I think that I was the guy who my friends made fun of for, we all had mohawks and we were all doing drugs as teenagers, and I would use a big word and my friends would make fun of me, and if I may, his friends called him Books when he was young. So we hung out, we're both from small towns. I'm not from Los Angeles, I'm from the Ozarks, which is in the hill country in America. And I think we both grew up in pretty shady places, and I grew up with a history of violence in my family that I've talked a lot about. I know Sean has something similar. So this is something that I'm familiar with, but also I do all sorts. I never do anything that I call research because research doesn't sound fun to me. I write about the things that I'm interested in, and sometimes that involves me going to South Central Los Angeles, which is in finding the dangerous neighborhoods and using a police scanner to find crimes and find cops at crime scenes and just looking. I've done that. I like to read indictments of gangs to learn details about gangs. And then for Hollywood, like I said, I work there. I hear a lot of whispers, and I also have done a lot of reading the newspapers, reading the tabloids, reading the scandal sheets, reading the rumor mills. Because I'm fascinated with it. And I think probably, and I will pass it to Sean, I think he's probably similar in that it wasn't that I was a gangster, I was a gangster adjacent growing up. And so I think that kind of works from the same place that way.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I grew up, with, my uncles were tough guys, rough dudes. Not so much gangsters, they were just the type of guys you did not want to bump into them and not say, excuse me. Because there's going to be a problem. I had a cousin whose nickname was Maul because he hit somebody one time and the hospital thought he'd been attacked with a hammer. So they were tough, big country boys. And I kind of like, Jordan, that's a good line, I was gangster adjacent. My friends were kind of wild, but I was the one that we would go, you only do this in the country, we would go and plan to fight some people. And then I would go and I would engage in fisticuffs for a few minutes, and then I would just leave, because I didn't want to get hurt. I had books to read and movies I want, and so I remember I tried to get my friends to go see a Jim Jarmusch movie called Night on Earth, and nobody wanted to go. And I basically made them go. I threatened to fight them. My grandfather made illegal moonshine when I was a kid. Like I said, I grew up around men and women who worked really hard and they partied really hard at the end of the week. And they were tough. They were intimidating people. I'll tell you a story. So one time when I was 12 or 13, I was going to school and there was a kid picking on me at school. He was stealing my lunch. And I come home one day and my uncle we all lived together in this big house, my uncle, my mom, my aunt, and my grandmother, my grandfather. And my uncle asked me, he said, why are you so hungry when you come home from school? I said, well, there's this kid and he's taking my lunch. He said, well, you gotta fight him. I said, well, he's bigger than me. And my uncle said, every day you come home from school that you haven't fought him, you're gonna fight me. And I was like, yeah, right. You're like this 35-year-old man with fists the size of bricks. I came home from school the next day. He said, that kid take your lunch? I was like, yeah. And he hit me in my chest so hard I thought my heart was going to stop. And so the next day at school, the kid came up to take my lunch. I was like, not today. Nope, I will fight you before I fight this grown man at home. And so there's this sense of, especially in small towns, that you grow up in an environment where you have to handle things yourself. You can't wait for the police to arrive. You can't wait for somebody to take care of you. And also, I think growing up in sort of a rural environment, there is this idea that in America, scary places are the city, New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago. And don't get me wrong, there are dangers there. But I don't think you've ever been really scared unless you've been on a country road at night and the sky's gone full dark and no stars. And so I think I try to incorporate that in my work. As far as research, I'm similar to Jordan. I don't like calling it research. I hate research. I like making shit up. And so, but I do some research here and there, but for the most part, I just do enough research that you believe that my characters know what they're talking about. So I don't have to know what I'm talking about. I just got to make you think the characters do.
Yeah.
And in such an environment where you grew up, both of you, there were drugs, crime around you, your uncles, they were tough guys. So at what point, and I'm asking you, but well, grew up in a similar environment, so the same question will come to you. So at what point did you say, I want to write, I want to go into writing? Was this a process, or did you always want to do it? How did this come about? Any of you can answer.
For me, I wanted to be a writer before I could write. I used to dictate stories to my mother, who would write them down in a book, and I would draw illustrations of monsters fighting to go along with it. And in my heyday as a wild person, I loved Hunter S. Thompson and William Burroughs, and so the idea that you could live in this world and be a writer was always available to me. And again, I was adjacent to a lot more things than I was ever a party to, but it was more about just the ambient violence in the air in a place like this. I mean, Sean described it very well. My hometown, there were violent Nazi skinheads that were running around, and one of my great-grandfathers was murdered in a shootout in my hometown. And so, we just I grew up in Bonnie and Clyde country. I hope that translates, but it's a very famous duo of criminals. And so it's just, that was more just in the air. And so it more dictated what I wrote about than whether or not I could be a writer.
I wanted to be a writer since I was 5 years old. My mother, who passed away in 21, used to tell the story that she taught me to read when I was 3. I don't remember that, but I remember being 4 years old and reading Spider-Man comic books. And so I've always wanted to be a writer. And I read voraciously as a child. We were very poor growing up, and so books was, in many ways, our way to escape. And so my mother read historical novels. My grandmother my aunt read horror novels. I read my first Stephen King novel when I was 9. Which is, don't do that, that's a terrible idea. But, my grandmother read romance novels, which are all salacious, and I would steal the romance novels and read them to my other cousins, and do voices and perform it and everything. And so when I was 7, my mother gave me a book of fairy tales, of bedtime stories, and I gave them a savage critique. I thought they were illogical, they didn't make any sense, and they had a lot of plot holes. And so she challenged me to write my own story. And so I wrote a story for her when I was 7 years old. And I remember her asking me, who helped you with this? Like, who helped you write this? I was like, nobody, I wrote it by myself. And she was like, did your brother help you? Because I have an older brother. And I was like, no, he's not much of a reader, so he didn't help. And so I remember the look on her face when it dawned on her that I had done this all by myself. And I've been chasing that look the rest of my life.
I can see that many of the books you talk about, or that were windows for both of you, are tattooed on your arm. I don't know if you want to show them. I don't know if maybe you want to tell me about some of your tattoos. Let's start with the books, because this is connected to the conversation. So what are these books that you have tattooed?
So I tattooed, and I have space on my arm so I can go all the way up. The reason I tattooed them on my arm, though, when I was writing All the Sinners Bleed, so this is a friend story. When I was writing All the Sinners Bleed, I was really struggling with that book. My previous book, Razorblade Tears, had been very successful, wildly more than we thought it would be. And so I put myself under a lot of stress trying to write this next book, trying to finish it. And two of my friends, Jordan and another friend of mine named Eric Pruitt, gave me really good advice. Eric Pruitt told me the book that I was working on, which ended up being All the Sinners Bleed, he said, it doesn't have to be as good as Razor Blade Tears. It just has to be good. And then I sent some chapters to Jordan, and I was like, am I doing too much with this? Am I my reach exceeding my grasp, because it was a true mystery? And he said, it's great. It's going to be fine. It's going to be your biggest book. He said, there's a quote you said about all you do with a mystery is you ask a question in the beginning that you answer in the end. And both of those pieces of advice really helped me. And so I tattooed these books on my arm to remind myself when it gets difficult, because it always does, that I can do this, that I've done this. And not only have I done it, but I've done it at a pretty high level. And so that's my book's tattoo. This is just a scary angel. This is seraphim. I grew up in a very religious household. My mother was religious. She went to church on Sundays and Wednesdays, and she squeezed in a Bible study. And I'm fascinated with Southern Gothic imagery and the idea of how Southern Gothic is tied to religion, to sex, to race, to class, and how many bad people consider themselves good people because they go to church. And so I had this tattoo because I love in the Bible, whenever an angel appears, they always calm people down. It's like, fear not, I am an angel, Lord. And I'm like, if I saw this, I would never be more terrified in my life. And so I just put this on to remind myself of that even something beautiful can scare you. So
I have a few book-related tattoos. This is the Persian cover for She Rides Shotgun, which unfortunately I don't even own a copy of, but I saw a picture of the cover online, and I just fell in love with this image. And then this is harder to see, but this is a man who is grasping his hands with a book at his feet because he's been shattered by what he read, which I call this reading Cormac McCarthy. So I have a few, but just to pivot for a second, what Sean was talking about, I with mysteries and time, I worked on a TV show called The Mentalist, which is where I feel like I got sort of a free master's degree in writing mysteries. I helped break 130 episodes. Each one was its own mystery. And, I think there's a moment when you study something long enough that it becomes very simple. And a mystery is, as Sean said, it's a question and an answer. And the art of a mystery is the tension between asking a question and answering it. If you ask a question and answer it, that's not a mystery. That's you ask a question, I answered it. It's about holding that until it breaks, and then answering it right before that moment. And there's a lot of tricks to do that. You introduce small mysteries. You start with, well, what was he doing the night he died? And that will drive you to the next scene. But you always have that question of who did it, why, And to me, once you understand that it's about the tension and holding it just right, mysteries get to me a lot easier to do. So,
I'm thinking now about your tattoo, the man with a book who is affected by what he read. So at what point do you think you need to stop when you're writing a violent scene? Do you know when to stop? When enough is enough? Have you ever needed to rewrite such a scene in your novels?
My rule of thumb is if I take the violence to a level that I start laughing, then I've gone too far. There's a scene in King of Ashes, not a spoiler, where somebody gets their teeth knocked out. In the original scene, like the teeth skittered across the floor. And I remember I said it like skipping stones on a pond. And I just bust out laughing when I wrote that. I'm like, okay, let's pull it back. We've jumped the shark. We've gone beyond the pale. As far as the actual physical act of violence in books, I never write violence in a way that I think is gratuitous. The violence in my books always means something. It means something to the characters, and it should mean something to the reader. It's easy to write a scene where somebody gets punched in the mouth or hit with a hammer or pushed downstairs. It's harder to write how that feels, both physically and emotionally, both for the person who's been attacked and the person doing the attacking. And what does that mean for the rest of the story? And how does it affect? I hate books where you read about somebody getting stabbed in chapter 3 and they never mention it again. Or someone gets hit you don't have to have been hit in the face to write crime fiction, but I've been hit in the face, and it hurts. And you don't just shake that off. I mean, I don't care how mad you are. You feel it. There's a burning sensation that comes up your nose. You know, your head rocks and rings. And so when I write violence, I want you to feel that. Also, I like writing what I like to call literary realistic violence. Like, fights in my books don't last long, like maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs. Because I used to be a security guard at a bar. Fights in real life don't last long. They end in 2 ways. Either everybody starts rolling around the ground wrestling, or somebody's really skilled and they knock somebody out. But either way, it's not gonna last more than 5 minutes. And so I really try to make sure that my violence stays within those parameters. You know, I get a question a lot about violence and do I feel like it's necessary? We live in a violent world. Like, we're from the United States. That's a country founded on violence, on the genocide of one people, the enslavement of another. And so for me, violence, unfortunately, is American as apple pie, so.
To follow that directly, my next novel, which will come out here in like 2027, is called A Violent Masterpiece. And that title is a direct reference to the United States of America, because one of the villains of the book says, America is a violent masterpiece, it can never be anything else. And I think we talk about this a lot, that lurid fiction, sordid fiction, pulp fiction, whatever you want to call it, is actually a great way of capturing the world we live in now, because we live in a ludicrous world where a lot of the veils have dropped and the boot is on our neck and we can feel it, and it's maybe not a time for subtlety, it's maybe not a time for misdirection and metaphor so much as somebody screaming, the house is on fire, because the house is on fire. And I think that while crime fiction doesn't need a justification, no novel or story needs a justification, a story is its own justification. That is one of the things I try to do, is to illuminate as best I can the truth of the violence that so many people either try to deny or hide. So.
Connected to this, I was going to ask you, what is the role of crime novel at a time when, as you say, everything is very turbulent, the far right is in many countries, is in power in many countries, we have authoritarian leaders in many countries as well. So what do you think is the role, I mean, not until now, but at this very moment, what do you think is the role of crime novel?
I think the role of crime fiction, or any writer, any artist, right now in this moment in 2026, is, like Jordan said, to scream, the house is on fire, the bridge is falling down, the foundation is rotten. I think artists, there are some artists, some people who are concerned that they don't want to speak out because it may affect their career. What kind of career are you going to have if your neighbors don't feel safe, if your country's taken from you, if democracy falls? You won't have a career. Authoritarian leaders the first thing they do is ban books. They try to shut down free speech and expression because they don't want people introduced to ideas that counteract their messaging. The second thing they do is they try to make you drown in despair. They want you to feel like everything is hopeless. They want you to feel like there's no way out. Crime novels are the perfect antidote to that, because crime novels, you see people in crime novels at the worst moment in their lives, at the time where they're at the most extreme. And you get to see people in a way that doesn't really exist in real life sometimes. People persevere, they push through. They survive and they thrive. And I think crime fiction, I have a friend named David Heskell Wheaton. He's a Native American writer. He said the crime novels are the new social novel because they're talking about the things that we don't want to talk about, the things we don't want to discuss. Racism, homophobia, classism, the elite power structure in America that right now is virtually getting away with crimes that aren't finding any recompense. For me, crime fiction is the place where I make the bad guys pay, you know? There's a wonderful Western movie called Open Range, and there's a line from one of the characters. He says, some people just need killing.
Yeah, to me, there are right-wing people who write crime novels that, if you ask me, end up being left-wing novels in many ways anyway. I'm thinking specifically of James Ellroy, who's one of my great influences, and I think where I and Ellroy differ is he would tell you he's describing the world the way it is. And I say he's describing the world the way we've made it. And I think that's a crucial distinction because there's this fatalism sometimes, this nihilism to noir to say, man is animal and man is wolf to man and this is, the way it must be. And to me, if you can take that same picture and say, yes, the police are as corrupt as James Ellroy paints them. Yes, there is murder and violence and rich people getting away with crimes. But even if you don't have to have a happy ending even. It's just as long as you acknowledge that this is the world we've made. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in the possibility of change. And I don't think you have to be didactic. I don't think you have to be preachy. But I do think that, the idea that you can get together with each other and stand up, and I know, particularly here in Barcelona, is a thing I admire. And I just think that the crime novel lends itself to that. It is a social novel. It is able to kind of take the weapons of the enemy and turn them against each other, to take the thrill of violence and then temper it so that the reader doesn't want to go out and commit violence, but that they can hold that in their heart and experience it and then move on. I think there's a lot of good in that.
I had a reader send me a nasty review about my book, Blacktop Wasteland. And there's a scene in Blacktop Wasteland where a young child gets shot. And they said to the effect, I didn't want to read this book. I want to escape from the world. Well, you can't. The world is all around us. We're in it. We are of the world and in the world. And so, in real life, it's cool to have car chases and shootouts and tough guys, but people die. Kids get shot. Houses catch on fire and nobody escapes. And so I think there is the job of the writer to hold that mirror up to the world and say, here it is. The world is an ugly place. The world is a bad place. But there's always hope. There's always the chance. My mother used to say, as long as you're breathing, you have a chance. And so I think that's the idea I try to bring with crime fiction, with crime novels, that no matter how dark it is, no matter how brutal the world I create, there are moments of laughter, of humor, of love. In King of Ashes, there's a scene where the three siblings are making dinner. And it's one of the few times you see them all together. And they're laughing with each other, and they're teasing each other and picking on each other. And they know secrets about each other that no one else knows, And that moment, I think, helps make the book even more tragic because you see the way it could be for them if they would talk to each other, if they would communicate. King of Ashes is probably one of my only books that's a true tragedy. And I was inspired by a lot of stuff, but mainly King Lear and Shakespeare, because I think tragedies are warnings. When you read a book like that or you watch a play like that, it is a warning what you shouldn't do and how you shouldn't behave. But that doesn't mean that you have to give up and give in to despair.
I don't know if, since you were saying in your novels you talk about many of the problems, in your case of the United States, things that take place in the United States, so maybe someone can accuse you of quote-unquote anti-American propaganda, if you catch my meaning, that you're not showing America as an ideal place. It hasn't happened so much with writers, but with singers, for example, when they give a perspective of their country that the state doesn't like so much. They've been criticized about that. I want to think this is not your case, but I'm asking anyway.
Fine with that.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. Yeah. I've had reviewers or critics or fans tell me, I'm never buying your books again. You're an anti-American. I thought you were a good American. I had when I wrote Razorblade Tears, I had people write to me, email me and message me, because Razorblade Tears is about two fathers who avenged their murdered gay sons. And I had people tell me, I don't want to read about gay stuff. Well, it's not gay stuff. It's people's lives, But yeah, I don't mind. I think, if somebody's calling you anti-American, they're not paying attention to the history of our country. I am in love with the idea of the American dream, but I'm disgusted with the reality of the American nightmare.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much in perfect agreement on this. I'm very open about my politics, and if anybody has a problem with that, they're free not to read. They're free to threaten us if they want to. That's fine. There are people putting their lives on the line in Minneapolis right now and many other places, and my partner's out in Los Angeles right now following ICE agents around, and when I get back, I'm going to be doing the same thing. So writing a book is not the dangerous thing, and so that doesn't bother me.
No, és d'admirar.
It's admirable, and I thought you were not receiving emails about that, but well, yeah, I mean, it may sound surprising, but it's happening more and more, I think. And I also wanted to ask you, while you wrote, were there any scenes, any parts of the book where you thought, I mean, maybe you were following like a script or like a series of points that you're following, and at some point you decide you need to change track? I don't know. What's your method, if you follow like an initial script or nothing to do with that?
As someone who worked a lot in television, I do tend to outline and plot everything out, but you have to be willing to know when something doesn't work. And I guess this is a mild spoiler, but I'll say it anyway. In the first draft of Everybody Knows, May dies at the end. And it was the original idea. I had the whole death mapped out. The whole book was built around this death. And then I wrote it, and I said, wow, this is a bummer. And I don't mind bumming people out, but it was the wrong kind of bummer. It just felt false and phony and empty. It felt nihilistic. And that wasn't what I wanted it to be. And so I just had to say, well, have to redesign this. And so I guess the spoiler is May doesn't die, but you just have to know when it's not working. You have to trust your gut. In every case, you have to trust your gut when you're outlining, but then when you're there on the page, if it doesn't work and you know it doesn't work, you have to listen to that part of yourself.
Yeah, I don't outline a lot. I write myself a very short script or synopsis to sort of plot out the ideas that I want to talk about. Like, perfect example, like with All the Sinners Bleed, I originally envisioned that book as like a large sort of like tribute to Dashiell Hammett, to Red Harvest, about this town that's full of corruption, and it was going to be about, it was influenced by the murder of George Floyd, and all these different ideas. And I got like 28,000 words into it. I'm like, this is not working. This is not working. It wasn't even bad. It was just boring. And I was like, okay. And so I had to like cannibalize the parts of the book that I liked, which was the sheriff, the town, and so the history of the town, and had to jettison everything else. But you can't be afraid to do that. I know people that are afraid to start writing because they're afraid they'll have to rewrite. Well, that's a part of the process. You have to, but you also have to trust yourself as a writer. Writing is sort of this benevolent dictatorship that you have with the word, with creativity. And like with King of Ashes, there were scenes in King of Ashes where my editor, who's an amazing editor, was basically like, I think this is too much, or I don't think you really need this, or this has to be in here. For me, once I had the story sort of crystallized in my mind, I knew exactly what had to be in there. And I knew I hoped I could write it in a way that would make it people would enjoy it, people would get it. And so then, like, it was so funny because before the book came out, she was just very nervous. She's like, I don't know, there's some dark stuff in here, and this is a dark book. And I'm like, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be all right. And then yesterday, I found out that we were longlisted for the Penn Faulkner Award for King of Ashes. When my editor called me to tell me, I was like, don't you ever doubt me again.
Congratulations on that, first of all. It's good that you're critical with yourselves and you know when to change something, when to correct something. Are you okay? So much crime. It gets to us. So, while he gets a minute to rest, we'll start with you. I'm sure, Cosby, you can tell us whether... can you tell us a bit about your future books, future projects? Will you continue basing your books in the United States, the South? It's like your cosmos. Will you continue writing about that part of the world?
I think so. The book I'm working on now is called Highway Full of Night. It's going to start in the American South, but the majority of the action is going to happen in Los Angeles and the areas around Los Angeles. And it's also set in the past. It's set in the 80s. For me, it is a way of challenging myself as a writer. I love writing about the South, about rural environment, small town violence and complexity. But at the same time, I don't want to rest on that. and not challenge myself as a writer, as an artist. Somebody asked me in an interview today, like, why do I set my books in made-up towns? And I'll be perfectly honest, I'm lazy. I don't like doing research. I don't like reading maps and all that kind of stuff. But this book is going to be set in Los Angeles. That's a real, actual place. I want to challenge myself to work within the confines of that. But also, I want to leave the South for a little bit. I don't ever want the South to become my crutch. I don't ever want it to become something that I lean on, and instead of pushing myself forward, I lean on that. I could write, and I probably will write 10 more books about my area, about the South, but I do want to try to step out and sort of embrace new settings, new ideas. So that book's I'm working on right now. I have a book coming out in July that's a collaboration with Marvel Comics. So that's going to be out in July. And then in September, I wrote a series of kids novels with the musician Questlove. So the second one of those comes out in September. And then, like I said, they're currently filming All of Sinners Bleed as a TV show for Netflix. And King of Ashes was bought by Netflix last year. So that'll start going into production soon. And then after all that, I want to take a break. I need a nap. All right.
I'm alive.
Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a recurring cough that just came on so hard, and I can't cough as loud as I need to while I have a microphone on. So I had to flee for a moment. But hopefully,
It's okay.
I'm not going to die. I hope. Thank you.
Okay, no.
I was just asking about future projects, and we will end with that. Maybe you can tell us a bit about your upcoming books. I don't know if you will have Hollywood in mind. You will write about Hollywood or about something completely different. What can you tell us about your future projects?
I'm still working a little bit in Hollywood. I have a horror movie coming out hopefully soon. Hopefully it will go into production soon. It's kind of a crime story, but they're vampires. And then I have my next novel, A Violent Masterpiece, that comes out in April in America and then next year here in Spain. And I'm really trying to write more novels. I've already started the one after that. It will not be set in LA. It's going to be kind of a Bonnie and Clyde love story set in the 90s. Because I try and put love in all of my books, but I've never written a love story, and this will be a very violent love story. It's called The Wildest Things. And it's going to be set either in the Ozarks or in rural California, but it's kind of going back to my earlier novels just because I kind of need to take a break. I'm tired of everybody emailing me every time there's a sex scandal in America. So I don't want to have a reputation as a guy who just writes about these horrible things in Hollywood. So, yeah.
Bueno, doncs són molt bons.
Okay, it all sounds very good. We'll pay attention to your future projects, and we hope you will come to future BCNegra festivals to tell us about these projects. I cannot but thank you so much. And to the audience, I hope you now are looking forward to reading their books. We have their books here. I hope you'll buy them because they're really worth it. Thank you so much for everything. I hope you enjoyed this.